Hey everyone, you ever see one of those pictures of Earth from space at night? You know the ones, where some parts are just blazing with light, but then you have these huge, vast stretches of pure darkness. It looks amazing, right? But it also points to this really fascinating puzzle about our planet and about us. So let's get into it.
So that leads us to the big question for this explainer. I mean, there are over 8 billion of us on this planet. You'd think we'd be spread out a little more evenly, wouldn't you? But we're not. Not even close. Most of us are packed together, leaving these massive parts of the globe almost completely empty. So why? Well, the answer is basically a story in two parts: what the planet lets us do and what we choose to do.
First things first, we've got to talk about the ground rules, and Mother Nature sets those rules. Long before any of us showed up with blueprints and building codes, the planet itself laid out the basic map for where life could actually work and where it really couldn't.
Geographers have this fantastic word for this: the Ecumene. Now, I know it sounds a little complicated, but the idea is super simple. It's just the habitable part of the world. Think of it as the planet's livable real estate. If you're outside the Ecumene, setting up a permanent home is going to be incredibly tough, if not straight up impossible. So, what exactly makes a place livable?
Well, it pretty much boils down to three main physical things. First up, you've got climate. We humans tend to stay away from places that are way too hot, way too cold, or way too dry. Makes sense. Then, there's the shape of the land itself, the landforms. It's just a whole lot easier to build cities, grow food, and, live on flat plains and in valleys instead of on the side of a steep mountain. And finally, and this one is absolutely critical, you have bodies of water. Just think about it. Every single major civilization in history popped up near a reliable source of fresh water. You need it to drink, to farm, and to get around.
So, here's the bottom line on this part. Nature lays the foundation. It draws the big, broad borders of that Ecumene, the livable zone. But within those borders, we humans start making choices. And this is where the story shifts from what's just possible to what we actually end up doing.
Okay, so now we get to the human side of the whole thing. Once nature provides the canvas, we're the ones who start painting on it. And we're driven by our own needs, our own desires, our own histories. This is where the patterns start to get really interesting.
So, what guides our choices? Turns out, there are 4 huge factors. Culture is a big one. It pulls us toward people who share our language, our food, our beliefs. It creates that sense of community. Then there's economics. It's a massive magnet. We flock to places that have jobs and opportunities. History also plays a huge part. We often built right on top of the settlements of our ancestors, following those ancient trade routes. And last but not least, politics. A stable government that keeps you safe and builds things like roads and schools? Yeah, that makes a place look a whole lot more attractive.
All right, so we've got a handle on the why of where people live. But now let's talk about the how. How geographers actually measure and make sense of these population patterns. And trust me, it's way more than just counting heads.
This right here is the key idea. A country with 1 billion people might actually feel less crowded than a tiny little city-state with just a few million, just because the country is so massive. The concept we really need to get our heads around is density. How many people are squeezed into a certain amount of space?
And this is where it gets really cool, because there isn't just one way to look at density. There are 3. First, you've got arithmetic density. It's the simplest one: total people divided by total land. Think of it like counting how many people are in a house. But physiological density is way smarter. It divides the total population by the amount of land you can actually farm on. This tells you how much pressure is on that country to grow food. It's like measuring how many people are crowded into just the kitchen, all waiting to be fed. See the difference? And finally, you have agricultural density. This one measures the number of farmers per unit of farmland, and it shows you how efficient a country's agriculture is. A low number usually means they've got some pretty advanced high-tech farming going on.
So, all this talk about density and farmland and who's in the kitchen, it all naturally leads to one of the most critical questions in all of human geography. Are we actually living sustainably? Can the land support the number of people who depend on it?
And that brings us to this idea of carrying capacity. It's a really powerful concept. Any environment, any piece of land has a limit to the number of people it can support over the long haul without falling apart. This includes everything: food, water, all the resources we need. You can think of this like a balancing act. When a population is below its carrying capacity, life's pretty good. There are plenty of resources for everyone. When it's at capacity, you've hit a nice, sustainable sweet spot. But
When a population goes over its carrying capacity, that's what we call overpopulation. The environment comes under some serious strain, and resources start getting scarce.
All right, let's tie all of this together. So we've seen how nature sets the stage, and how our human choices direct the action on that stage. We've learned how we measure the crowds with tools like density and carrying capacity. But what does this all actually mean for our planet?
This quote really just nails it. The way we all cluster together in these big cities and fertile river valleys has enormous consequences. It puts a ton of pressure on the local environment, on water supplies, and on the land itself.
And that, right there, is the biggest takeaway from all of this. Our settlement patterns are not just some quirky thing on a map. They are a fundamental force that drives environmental change, how we use resources, and honestly, the overall health of our world. Understanding these patterns is really the first step toward managing our impact.
And that leaves us with one last big, thought-provoking question to chew on. The rules we've talked about today, they're not set in stone. New technology can make deserts bloom, while climate change might make some of our most crowded areas unlivable. So as our world keeps changing, where is the next chapter of the human story going to unfold?